Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. We talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm your host, Jeffrey, and subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. Now, the Week 17 AP Top 25 poll is out in college basketball, and I'm going to go over the rankings this week and see what I think about them. Houston's the number one team, and they beat Tulane, and they won at ECU this past week. And Houston has been playing really good basketball this season. And overall, as long as they can continue to keep winning basketball games the rest of the season, they should stay the number one team because no other team's been able to take that spot from them right now. And the Cougars have been playing great basketball all year, and they look prime for a deep run in the NCAA tournament. Alabama's the number two team, and they won at South Carolina, and they won against Arkansas this past week. Alabama's a fantastic team, and they do have a win over Houston already this year, but they barely won on the road at South Carolina, and they barely squeaked by Arkansas at home, and that's why Alabama cannot challenge Houston for the number one spot right now. But Alabama still has a great team, but amid all the stuff going on with the Alabama program right now, it's going to be really interesting to see how they perform moving forward. Kansas is at number 3, and they won at TCU, and they won against West Virginia this past week. Kansas kind of struggled against the two teams they played as well, but both opponents were better than the teams that Alabama played. Kansas was able to get revenge over TCU, who beat Kansas already in the Fog, so Kansas was able to return the favor, and they barely beat West Virginia at home, but the Mountaineers did play a really good game, and Kansas is really close to taking the number 2 spot from Alabama, but they stay at number 3 for now. UCLA's at number 4, and they won at Utah, and they won at Colorado this past week. The Bruins have looked like the top team in the Pac-12 this year. They've been playing really well all season long, and they've avoided most of the upsets this season, unlike what Arizona's gone through in the Pac-12 this year. And if UCLA can keep winning at the end of the season, then they should stay in the top 5. Purdue's at number 5, and they lost to Indiana this past week. Purdue still has a great resume, and they only have 5 losses. So despite losing to their rivals, the Indiana Hoosiers, they stay at number 5. But Purdue has lost 4 of their last 6 games. They were 22-1 at one point of the season, but Purdue has been struggling a little bit lately, and there seems to be some cracks in the roster right now on playing at a high level. But overall, if Purdue can get back to the way they were playing earlier on in the year, then Purdue could still be a great team that could have a really good March Madness. But overall, Purdue still has a top 5 resume for now, but they have been slipping as of late. Marquette's at number 6, and they won at Creighton, and they won against DePaul this past week. Marquette has been one of the hottest teams in college basketball this year. They've been skyrocketing up the AP Top 25 rankings, and Shaka Smart is a team that he should be proud of on both sides of the ball. They're playing great on offense, and they're playing great on defense. Tyler Kolek is a fantastic league guard, and Marquette's been playing great basketball in the Big East this season, and the way they're playing right now, they definitely deserve to be in the top 10, and they could do some really special things come March Madness. Baylor's at number 7, and they lost at Kansas State, and they won against Texas this past week. Baylor has 8 losses, and despite losing on the road at Kansas State, Baylor moves up 2 spots because of a lot of other teams losing around them. But the Baylor Bears have been a team that's been playing much better basketball as of late, and Scott Drew, he's done a fantastic job with Baylor, turning them around from a team that was unranked at one point in the season to now being a team that's ranked in the top 10. They have a great resume, and they've been able to fight through the rugged Big 12. And overall, Baylor's been playing really good basketball, and they have a resume worthy of being in the top 10. Arizona's at number 8, and they lost to their rivals Arizona State on a buzzer-beating 3 from Desmond Cambridge Jr. And Arizona's a team that's been slipping up in Pac-12 play this season. All 5 games they've lost to were to teams that they probably should have beaten all of them, but no team is perfect, so you're not really expecting Arizona to go undefeated. But if Arizona is a team that plays really well against great competition, but then they struggle against teams that are worse than them, it could spell doom for Arizona. They could slip up early on in the NCAA tournament. But Arizona still has a great team, but they're just going to have to play consistent basketball. Losing on a buzzer-beating 3 to Arizona State is not the worst loss in the world, even though it was at home, and that's why Arizona only moves down 1 spot. And they still have a great resume, but Arizona is going to have to play consistent basketball if they want to reach their highest potential this season. Texas is at number 9, and they won against Iowa State, and they lost at Baylor this past week. Texas has only 7 losses this year, and Rodney Terry's done a fantastic job filling in as the interim head coach since Chris Beard was fired. And Texas has been playing some of the best basketball in the Big 12 this season. They've been playing much better as of late, and losing in Waco is nothing to be ashamed of. Baylor has one of the best home environments in college basketball, and overall, Texas still got a really solid win over Iowa State, so they definitely still deserve to be in the top 10. Gonzaga's at number 10, and they won against San Diego, and they won against St. Mary's this week. Gonzaga might not be playing as well as they have been the past few years, and their guard play is not as elite as it has been, but they only have 5 losses, and with the win over St. Mary's, they were able to clinch a share of the regular season title of the West Coast Conference, so that was really good for Mark Few's team to be able to build momentum as March Madness comes around the corner. And Gonzaga has been playing better basketball as of late, and even though they have been a bit down this year, and they're ranked in the top 10 right now, and they were at least able to get a share of the West Coast Conference regular season title. Kansas State's at number 11, and they won against Baylor, and they won at Oklahoma State this past week. Jerome Tang has done a fantastic job with Kansas State this year. He's been one of the top first-year head coaches in recent memory in college basketball, and probably the top first-year head coach in Kansas State history. Kansas State has had a history of being a good program in the past at times, but lately the Wildcats have been down. In the Big 12 Conference, it's been one of the toughest in college basketball the past few years, but Jerome Tang has had the Wildcats playing great basketball. Keontae Johnson and Marquise Noel, if they keep playing at a high level, they could have the Wildcats do some special things in March Madness, and they're right outside the top 10 right now, but they have a great resume, and they're playing like one of the top 10 teams in college basketball right now after having a little bit of a skid earlier on in the season. Tennessee's at number 12, and they lost at Texas A&M, and they won against South Carolina this past week. Tennessee now has 8 losses, and they've been up and down as SEC play has gone along, and Tennessee's going to have to find consistency if they want to be a team that does some special things in March Madness, because overall, Tennessee has a lot of talent, and at times they look like one of the top 10 best teams in college basketball, but then they have games where they play really badly, and they just do not look like the same team. And Rick Barnes, throughout his coaching career, has had that inconsistencies during the NCAA tournament, not being able to get really good teams far in the tournament. So Rick Barnes really needs Tennessee to make a deep run this year, and Tennessee is capable of it, but they can't keep having games like losing at Texas A&M, even though that wasn't really a terrible loss because the Aggies are playing well, and they at least were able to get a big win over South Carolina by 40, and Josiah Jordan-James did return in that game, so maybe Tennessee's getting healthy at the right time, but Tennessee's still been very inconsistent, but they're going to have to start playing at a higher level of basketball consistently if the Volunteers want to have a really good end to their season. Virginia's at number 13, and they lost at Boston College, and they lost at UNC this past week. Virginia's the team that drops the farthest in the AP Top 25 poll this week, because losing at North Carolina, that's not necessarily a bad loss, even though UNC is kind of down this year, but losing at Boston College, that was a horrible loss, and Virginia is a team right now that their offense is nowhere to be found. Their defense is still playing really well, even though their defense actually hasn't been playing as well as it normally has lately, but they still have a solid defense, but their offense, they just cannot get any scoring going, and Tony Bennett's going to have to find a way to get his Virginia team turned around and quick if they want to be able to have a really good end to their season. UConn's at number 14, and they won against Providence, and they won at St. John's this past week. UConn was a team that started out the season 14-0, and they really started to fade down the stretch of the Big East season, but lately they've turned it around. Dan Hurley has stabilized the program, and UConn looks re-energized, and they've been playing really well, looking like one of the top teams in college basketball yet again. Both wins were really solid this week, and if the Huskies keep playing at a high level, they'll keep moving up the AP Top 25 rankings, and who knows what they can accomplish in March. Indiana's at number 15, and they lost at Michigan State, and they won at Purdue this past week. Indiana's a team just like Baylor that lost a game this past week, but still moved up 2 spots because of the fact winning at Purdue, that was a huge win to sweep their rivals. And even though they lost at Michigan State was a team that had just played their first home game against Indiana after the dreadful school shooting that happened on campus. Rest in peace to all those people. And Indiana just could not get the win at Michigan State, and that emotional win for the Spartans. But Indiana was able to bounce back and get an emotional win of their own at Purdue. That was a huge win for Indiana. And overall, if Indiana keeps playing at a high level, and if Jalen Hood-Schifino can keep emerging as one of the top guards in the country, and Trace Jackson Davis keeps playing at a high level, and if they can get Xavier Johnson back off of his foot injury, then Mike Woodson's team could possibly have a deep tournament run, do some special things in March Madness. Miami's at number 16, and they won at Virginia Tech, and they lost to Florida State this past week. The Hurricanes have been a team that have looked really solid the longer the season's gone along. They actually had some slip-ups earlier on in the year, but they've been playing much better, and Jim Larinagas had a team that was getting really good guard production, and overall, Miami's just been playing very well, and they've been avoiding the slip-ups, and it looked like Miami was going to finish the regular season strong, but then they suffered a loss to Florida State on a buzzer beater, just like Arizona lost to Arizona State on a buzzer beater, and overall for Miami, they're just going to have to get back on track and not let this loss to the Seminoles get to them and just turn it around and start playing better basketball again, because Miami is a really talented team, but they can't have any more slip-ups like this. St. Mary's is number 17, and they want to get specific, and they lost at Gonzaga this past week. St. Mary's had a fantastic season, and Randy Bennett's done a great job with his team, having the Gales at the top of the West Coast Conference along with Gonzaga. And St. Mary's has had a great season, even though they were not able to sweep Gonzaga and win the West Coast Conference. Instead, they just shared the West Coast Conference with Gonzaga. They still had a great season, and they could really do some great things in the NCAA tournament if they keep playing at a high level. San Diego State's at number 18, and they won against Colorado State, and they won at New Mexico this past week. San Diego State keeps trucking along in Mountain West play, and Brian Dutcher, his team has done a great job improving as the season's gone along, and now they look like the team to beat in the Mountain West. At the beginning of the season, it looked like New Mexico, but they've been fading down the stretch, and San Diego State was able to get a buzzer-beating win over New Mexico, and there was a lot of buzzer beaters this past Saturday as college basketball starts winding down and the season gets into crunch time, and a lot of teams are playing at a high level, but San Diego State keeps playing the way they are in Mountain West play. They could be a really good team in March Madness. Xavier's at number 19, and they lost to Villanova at home, and they won at Seton Hall this past week. And Xavier now has 8 losses, and they're really missing Zach Fremantle. He's a really good player for the Musketeers, but his injury has really hurt Xavier overall. But Sean Miller still has a really solid team, and if they can get him back healthy soon, then Xavier could still be really good. And losing to Villanova at home was a tough loss, but Villanova's starting to play better as of late because they got Justin Moore back off his ACL injury that he suffered in the NCAA tournament last year. But Xavier was able to get a bounce back win at Seton Hall. So for the Musketeers, they're just going to have to get healthy and start playing at a high level like they were earlier on in Big East play if they want to have a really good run in the NCAA tournament. Providence is at number 20, and they lost at UConn, and they won at Georgetown this past week. Losing at UConn is not a bad loss, especially the way the Huskies have been playing lately. But Ed Cooley's team, they were able to get a good bounce-back win at Georgetown. They've had a really great season with Bryce Hopkins leading the way, and they only have 8 losses, which is not too bad, especially considering how tough the Big East Conference has been this season. But if Providence keeps playing well, and if they can avoid more slip-ups down the stretch of the season, then Providence will be setting themselves up for potential success in March Madness. Maryland's at number 21, and they won against Minnesota, and they won against Northwestern this past week. And Maryland's a team that not a lot of people thought were going to be this good in Kevin Willard's first season as the head coach after he came over from Seton Hall as their head coach. And the Terrapins have been a great team this year, especially at home. And Kevin Willard's gotten much more out of the roster than a lot of people thought that he would. And he has the Terrapins toward the top of the Big Ten, and they've risen up above the jumble of teams that are in the middle of the pack of the Big Ten Conference. But Maryland's going to have to prove that they can win on the road and win on neutral sites if they're going to have a good run in the NCAA tournament. But still, Maryland's had a great season, and they're worthy of being in the top 25 right now. And Maryland fans should definitely be happy where the Terps are at right now. TCU's at number 22, and they lost to Kansas, and they won at Texas Tech this past week. With Mike Miles' return, the Horned Frogs have been playing much better basketball as of late. They did lose to Kansas at home. That was a really tough loss, but they were able to get a bounce-back win at Texas Tech at the end of the game by 1 point. And the Red Raiders have been playing much better basketball as of late themselves. So if TCU can stay healthy and avoid more injuries down the stretch of the season, then TCU could still be a really great team and one of the best teams in the Big 12 in March Madness. Kentucky's at number 23, and they won at Florida, and they won against Auburn this past week. And Kentucky's a team that's been coming around as of late. They won 4 in a row, and they entered the top 25 just like Maryland has this week. And John Calipari has a team that a lot of people thought was not going to be as good as the team that he had last year. But Kentucky lost to St. Peter's in the first round of the NCAA tournament. And for a while, Kentucky looked like a team that wouldn't even make the tournament this year. But now Kentucky looks like a lock for the tournament. Who knows? Kentucky might have a better March Madness than they had last year, especially if the team keeps gelling and if John Calipari can get the most out of his roster, which has been playing better as of late. Texas A&M's at number 24, and they won against Tennessee, and they lost at Mississippi State this past week. And the Aggies have been a team that's been toward the top of the SEC this season. And Buzz Williams, he's done a fantastic job this year with Texas A&M because a lot of people didn't think Texas A&M would be this good. And overall, they have been kind of inconsistent, a bit up and down all year, especially on the offensive end. But that win over Tennessee was really good. And even though they lost at Mississippi State, the Hump is a tough place to play. Texas A&M has been playing better as of late, and they're worthy of a top 25 ranking right now. Pittsburgh's at number 25, and they won against Georgia Tech, and they won against Syracuse this past week. And Jeff Capel's done a marvelous job with the Pittsburgh Panthers this year. Most people in the preseason did not think Pittsburgh would be an NCAA tournament team, but they now look like a lock for the NCAA tournament. And it might be a byproduct of the ACC being down this year, but Pittsburgh has beaten all the teams that they should have beaten in the ACC this season, and they look primed and ready to be a dangerous team in the ACC tournament and potentially do some special things in March Madness. And the teams that dropped from the AP Top 25 rankings this week, Creighton, Northwestern, and Iowa State, all teams that lost 2 games this past week, and especially now that we're getting toward the end of the regular season, those were all tough losses. But these are all teams that are really solid and could re-enter the AP Top 25 poll if they can start winning again. And the teams that are in the other seeding votes, you have Creighton, Duke, Oral Roberts, Northwestern, Florida Atlantic, Iowa State, Nevada, Missouri, Arkansas, Charleston, NC State, Clemson, Memphis, Boise State, USC, VCU, and West Virginia. And a lot of these teams have been ranked at one point or another in the AP Top 25 poll this season, but they're just on the outside right now, and they could re-enter the AP Top 25 poll if they can start winning the rest of their games at the end of the regular season. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens. So that's the Week 17 AP Top 25 poll in college basketball. There's been a lot of movement as we're getting closer and closer to March Madness. A lot of teams are getting big wins, and a lot of teams are getting upset as a lot of teams are trying to get big wins to close out the regular season. But it's going to be really interesting to see which teams perform well down the stretch of the season that help their case for March Madness, and which teams start to slip and fade down the stretch of the season. And it's also going to be interesting to see which teams end up in the final AP Top 25 rankings when it's all said and done. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Comment down below what you think about the Week 17 AP Top 25 poll in college basketball, and if you think the teams are ranked where they should be, and if not, where you think the teams should be ranked instead. And I will see you next time.